Welcome to another episode of Let's Talk About Mental Health. I'm Nels and I'm an addiction psychiatrist working in Southern Vermont.
And my name is Robert Stack. I'm a licensed alcohol and drug counselor.
And as a reminder, for your questions or comments, we have an email at questions@letstalkvt.com. And we also have a Facebook site at www.facebook.com/letstalkvt. And tonight we have a guest in the audience, a guest in the studio with us, Dr. Roberta Bennett, who's coming to us from Bennington.
Right.
Welcome, Bobby.
Well, thank you very much. I'm really pleased to be here.
Good, good. And I think what sort of intrigued us and had us invite you was when we learned about some of the work that you're doing in one of the New York State school systems around teaching kids meditation and the benefits they've been seeing from that.
Right. It's just started this year, but the Hoosick Falls Central School District just this year, after a lot of preparation and getting all of the teaching staff and counseling staff on board and talking with the community, but they've introduced a mindful curriculum, and they're partnering with a group out of McLean Hospital in order to track via a student self-assessment questionnaire students' own assessment of their feelings of well-being, and they've taken the test at the beginning of the year, and we're going to work on the mindfulness skills this year, and then at the end of the year they'll test again, and we're hopefully going to see some positive benefits from this, which I fully expect to. Yeah.
When you mention mindfulness, what do you mean by that? I mean, if you could explain it a little bit more. Mindfulness
is, it can be many different things, but for me, the overarching description of it is practice at turning inward. The world is very, very busy. It's alternately terrifying and incredibly tempting and sparkly and glittery. And the way our lives go right now, so much of our attention is pulled outward always to see the next thing, to be careful about danger, all of that, and it's coming at us faster and faster and faster. And we really don't have that quality alone time and that ability to sit and just focus inwardly. So things that increase our mindfulness are things that turn us inward, like sitting meditation, but also Tai Chi, yoga. These are all things that when you're doing them and you're so focused on what's going on internally that thought kind of slows down. You don't do a lot of thought wandering when you're trying to keep your balance and do a pose in yoga. That's the goal of sitting meditation as well, and what it does is it increases the robustness of the area of our brain right here in the front, the frontal lobe, and that's the area where we have the ability to kind of put the brakes on, to think about what the possible outcomes of a given course of action are, and then pick the right one, or the best one. Let's say, I'm going to say right. Our metacognition, our ability to see the big picture, to take in many different viewpoints at once. When you're afraid, you narrow right down and you look out and you don't see anything around you. When you're mindful, you take in the big picture, you feel safe, and you use all of your skills and faculties in order to make decisions and move about in the world.
I've been trying to practice daily meditation for a while now, and I've always considered it part of my spirituality, actually. I've considered it a piece of it anyway.
Yeah.
And that's what I used to think when I heard people who did yoga or meditation. I thought that this was their way of experiencing spirituality without actually saying that. I mean,
it's a direct experience. One of the things that happens if you do it long enough, I mean, sometimes it's hard to get started. That's one thing to tell people and to make sure. Working on mindfulness can feel a little frustrating at the beginning because you really have to have a little bit of a discipline because you don't see the benefit right off the bat, but you do begin to see it pretty quickly. When you work at it long enough, you can get to the point where you do begin to get that sense, regardless of what your belief system is, whether you're atheist, whether you're Christian, whether you're Hindu, or whatever your belief system is around spirituality. you do begin to get a direct body experience of feeling as if you are part of something much larger. And it's a very supportive, kind, gentle feeling. And so, and I think many people do say that that is their spirituality. It does feel that way.
You know, I'm just thinking that I'm curious about what got the school system to bring you in to do this sort of thing, because we're often talking about this, the idea that medication is not the only answer, but so often they're sought to do more than they really should, and a balanced approach is often missing, and this sounds like a very balanced approach.
Well, it's very unique, and I have to give credit to the superintendent of the Hoosick Falls School District. I don't think, well, I won't say his name, you can probably look it up anyway, but he's very frank about his past history as almost being a lost soul in his high school years, where he got into a lot of difficulties with substance abuse. And then finally one teacher sat him down and said, "What are you doing?" Basically, really just spoke very directly to him. And he then went into college with the intent of becoming a teacher. But he came to realize during that time that he himself was sort of ADHD in the sense that he had a very active mind, had a hard time sitting still, which is part of the reason why I think that he got pulled into the substance abuse, because he was having difficulty with his schoolwork and things like that. Not that he wasn't bright. And he was the one that figured out that the mindfulness really was making a lot of difference in many school systems across the state. There's a lot of people out in California who are, they're having really good results when they introduce it. So he was the one that got on board, and he's worked solidly for the last 5 years with the school board, with his teachers, really working hard to bring this to fruition. And it was incredibly easy for me to step into it. He had done all the hard work.
Right.
I'm thinking, and when we talked about this somewhat before the show, there are a lot of the advantages or benefits you mentioned on meditation struck me as being very sort of similar, if not exactly the same, as some of the qualities that are seen in the literature about resilience in children. And I was wondering if you could speak to that somewhat. Yeah,
I mean, I think, one of the things that we know about mindfulness, and I get most of this information when I structure, how I talk about it and resilience, most of this is from the sensory motor psychotherapy approach that was developed by Patricia Ogden and Janina Fisher and Bessel van der Kolk, who's with the Trauma Center in Boston.
Right,
also,
so sensations and movement are tied together.
That they're, we process on 3 different levels, and we have direct sensory motor input, then we have the emotional, and then we have the story that we tell about it. And what happens with mindfulness is that you end up giving children the ability to tolerate more intense feelings without losing behavioral control. And it's not just children, it gives adults that too. Because we are all every age we've ever been. So that what mindfulness does is it really does give you the ability to feel really painful feelings, or in some cases really joyful feelings. There are some people who have had childhood experiences that and they feel a lot of shame, and it's very hard for them to allow themselves to actually feel pleasure. So on either end of the spectrum, either really good feelings or really painful feelings, mindfulness actually does allow you to widen that window of tolerance. And so it allows you to be present and fully enjoy and experience your life in a way that I don't think that other approaches offer in quite the same way.
Giving us a broader range of comfort before we enter fight or flight.
Before we enter fight or flight, or before we enter collapse and submit or dissociate.
Right, fight, flight, or freeze, I should say.
And freeze goes different ways, because there's the hypervigilant freeze, which everybody knows, where you're walking in the house and you hear, and it's dark, and you hear something and you stop You're ready to move. You're not paralyzed. You're ready to move. You're just very attentive. But then there's the freeze that I think other people use to think of the submit collapse, which is basically you actually become paralyzed. You become hypotonic and floppy. And you can see animals have this same reaction too. If you look at, like, on Animal Planet, when the sick or elderly zebra gets carved off from the herd and the lions pounce upon it, there's a point at which it stops struggling, and that's a brainstem response. And so many people feel that. I admit to be a big that kind of freezer. Like, a lot of my dreams when I was growing up were about bad things happening and me being unable to move, to stop it.
Can't run.
I couldn't run. I couldn't get out of the way. I couldn't yell. Those sorts of things.
Are you going to be working with very young, kindergarten? Are you going to follow them through school?
Yes.
Or, I mean, is there a difference?
Yeah, that's okay. The self-assessment test is truly self-administered, so they have to be able to read. So those kids are only going to be getting those from 4th grade through 12th grade. But the kindergarten through 4th grade kids are they still have a mindfulness program, and they're starting it. We're just not able to track them, but once they move into 4th grade, they will do that.
And what are you looking for? I mean, quite frankly, at the end.
Well, there's two things. So one of the things is we're looking for an overall improvement in kids' scores. Now, the test that is being given is a test that has been normed, and they're able to sort kids into, they're looking at 4 different qualities. The kids' assessment of these qualities within themselves. One is an action orientation, so that is, are they more likely to want to be active and move around? One is assertiveness. Are they more assertive, or are they very quiet and not assertive? One is belonging. How related do they feel to other people? How connected do they feel to other people? And then the other one, there's 4 of them. The other one is self-reflection. How well able are they to go in and reflect on their behavior and other behaviors? Do they have an emotional literacy? And then what the plan is that each kid will get an individual profile based on how they answered this at the beginning of the year. And kids will be identified. Some will be in a high-risk zone, which they know that these are kids that actually probably are able to have actual diagnoses. Then there are kids that are at risk, and then there's a group where they seem pretty resilient and they're not too worried about them. And the plan is, and I'm going just at the end of this week to get trained in this so that we can help institute this, is to take kids' strengths as the door that we go through to help them work on their weaknesses.
Of course.
Ah, nice.
That makes sense.
Isn't that nice?
Yeah, and I mean, when I think about what we were taught in training, around, for example, the reason to medicate or treat ADHD in children is because if they can't settle down and focus, then they can't succeed, because this is basically their job in school.
Right.
And that sort of treatment is important for them to sort of build upon success. Now,
right.
Some of the later literature sort of criticizing that maybe they didn't have better academic performances, but were better easily managed in a classroom. Right. And I'm wondering, but what you're talking about here seems like a different way of making sure that children sort of progress better, they do better at the job of school and succeed in later life.
I think it's recognizing a number of realities that we didn't see or couldn't see before. One is that we are all different. There was an amazing TED Talk. I think it was the 2013 TED winner, the overall prize winner, by an Indian man named Sugata Mitra, about why are schools the way they are. And essentially what his argument is that the reason that schools are desks in a row, you've got to sit, there's a teacher up front, and this really speaks to the Common Core stuff, actually. And that actually was developed during the time when there was the British Empire, that what the British needed at that time, before computers and everything, were people who were essentially possessing the same skills, the same knowledge set, and were interchangeable, so that if they sent you to Hong Kong or if they sent you to Australia or whatever, that you could fill in for somebody that had been there that was no longer able to do that, and things would just keep going. And his point now is that we really don't need that kind of rounding off of everybody's edges anymore, that we all have talents and skills to bring to this world. The internet is there, and we don't really need to memorize facts anymore. We can, well, you have to be careful about where you get your facts, but I think there is a way, it's at our fingertips, and that I'm going to think of the number of times, mostly I use it for figuring out what that actor's name was in that film that I just saw, because I can't remember anybody's name anymore. But that kind of information is there, and what we need is to set our kids free to use what they are bringing into this world in the best possible way. That we really, if we think about it, school is set up for the convenience of the, I'm denigrating teachers if I say that. We need to think outside of the box more than we do, I think, about educating kids. One
of the things I wanted to ask before we get away from it is, do you teach the parents of the children?
That's one of my biggest jobs is that I'm there to reassure parents, because many parents are very frightened of this initiative because they associate meditation or mindful movement with another religion. Mm-hmm. And the point that is that many religions incorporate this practice, and you don't have to believe any of them for this to work. All you have to do is do it, because it works. And we have the science now to show. We actually can show with fMRI and SPECT scans and whatnot. You can see the difference in how people's brains function when they've done this for a while.
Thank you.
Yeah. I find it interesting because, sometimes people, when you start to talk about genetics and talk about brain structures and these various fancy imaging things, they feel like, and sort of the various types of chemicals that surge through the brain with love, with attachment, with anger, they're like, you're taking the magic away from it. And I'm like, no, I feel quite the contrary.
Oh,
Once we start to drill down,
it still feels like magic to me. How it feels is important. It's not how it looks, it's how it feels. The magic is still there. For me, the science of this, the learning about mindfulness, the learning about attachment, all of us have styles of attachment. And we flounder our way through our lives as best we can. That's part of what it is, that we learn how to be in relationship with ourselves and other people from our parents. Some of our parents do better than others. We all have, that's something that is always true, that there's always something our parents could have done better for us, and we're always handing things down to our kids. But the point really for me was shame was a big thing in my family. And I don't think they weren't shaming, they embodied shame, so that we're the politest, most tender, sensitive, I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings people in the world, to the point where, a lot of times we get walked over. For me, learning about all this allowed me to embrace my shame. Oh shoot, I wasn't supposed to do that. Allowed me to embrace my shame and to realize that, this is, you learn this, and there are strengths to it, because the good side of shame is compassion. When you really know what it feels like to be apart from your fellow man, that's what shame is. It's meant to keep you away if you're behaving badly. It really makes you feel terrible when you see it happening to someone else. So I look at that as a strength now, and learning the science helped me remove my self-judgment. So I can actually embrace it, and I can use it as a strength.
If you don't mind, if we could go back to that.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit more about the attachment disorder. I've never quite understood it. And you said earlier, you mentioned mirror neurons.
Yeah.
And I'd really like to understand that.
Okay, so we'll take an example. Let's take a hypothetical person, a baby, and let's say, because you talk about mental health and addictions on this show a lot, let's say there is a parent, it could be the mother or the father. Moms generally have more contact with infants early on, so we'll talk about mom, but I'm not at all saying that moms are responsible for everybody's problems. No way. But when the part of the brain that is working when babies, in utero actually, and when babies are born, is the right hemisphere primarily. And the right hemisphere is not factual. It's emotional, it is procedural, and what I mean by that is it's really concerned with the how of doing things. And this is why babies don't come out talking. They can't. It takes about, you know, a year to 2 years is when you start to see language coming online. Prior to that time, they are just taking everything in and learning who they are and who are they in this world in relation to other people. So if you've got a mother, let's say, who's having problems with substance abuse, she may have anxiety, she may have depression, she may at times not be very available because of her substance use. That baby is going to get an experience of mother holding them and sometime making eye contact with them. And if you notice that I'm holding in my left arm here a baby, I'm imagining eyes down here, and I'm making eye contact, and I'm looking left, and then the baby's face is turned up and looking left as well. And so basically this is the optimal position for right hemisphere to right hemisphere connection. Now, everybody has mirror neurons, and these are neurons that are scattered throughout our nervous system, and they are there to jump the synapse between people, so that attachment is very important because we're helpless. If we don't attach to a caregiver when we're born, we will die. And so attachment is very, very important. And so what happens is, if you have a mother who is sometimes looking at baby with love, and when baby sees love in a mother's face, baby's body feels that. It's like when you know when somebody's glad to see you, and the big smile, and you can feel like, wow, I'm welcome here. Yeah. This is good stuff. I like this. When mom is distracted, under the influence, depressed, that's not there. Baby looks, and what this creates is, in the infant, is this feeling of, I need to get that. There's a panic, a terror, like I've got to get that look back. Where is that? I've seen it, I know she can do it. I mean, they don't actually have these thoughts, but this is a drive. And so there's this seeking feeling that comes from it. And this anxiety that once they get something, that they might lose it again. And so what this leads to is an anxious ambivalent attachment style when you get older, and persons with that actually get what gets entrained or hardwired in us is the seeking. And that when we actually have something good in front of us, fear of loss, so we don't really enjoy it. And so it takes a lot of work to kind of get down underneath that, and a lot of new healing relationships to help to get to the other end of that. And mindfulness helps with that.
Because the seeking, I mean, that's something that's very evolutionarily deep.
It is. It's one of our drives.
We have to
have that.
And it's often described as being one of the mechanisms that goes awry with addictions as well.
Well, if there are I don't know how many. I don't remember the count. I could name them and do it, but I don't want to bore people. The first 3 basic action tendencies that we have as human beings. Number 1 is defense. So that's, you know, like, am I in danger of losing my life? And to an infant, having somebody not look at you or look at you blankly is being in danger of losing your life. Well, and for us too, really, it's the same thing.
Is that connected to failure to thrive? I don't
it would be. I mean, like extreme lack of reciprocity on the part of a caregiver would cause an infant to submit and collapse, which is what failure to thrive.
I remember they used to have volunteers come in and hold AIDS babies at the beginning of the epidemic when they were frightened.
Attachment, right.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, it's okay, yeah. So defense is the first one. Attachment is the second one, the drive to find another face and get a smile and love on that face. And then the third one is exploratory, and that is seeking. Okay. So that attachment trauma frequently leads to that feeling of anxiety, of not having what you need, being worried that you won't be able to get what you need, and then when you do get something that you need, not really being able to recognize it or hold on to it because you're already worried about losing it, and the whole thing keeps going.
And can you, when you talk about treating somebody with that, I mean, you're talking about the importance of a therapeutic relationship. one-to-one?
Well, a group or one, but yeah, that's why groups are great, because the relationships among group members are also very healing. But yeah, but interpersonal relationships. They always say, like, what is damaged in interpersonal relationship is healed in interpersonal relationship.
Now, and of course, we're always talking about this too, that you know, we're pack animals, which I think is what a lot of this refers to.
Right, it's right. We cohesive. We need each other to survive. We co-regulate each other.
We're hairless, weak, slow mammals. We really need to have somebody have our back, right, to feel that connection with each other. And of course, that gets disrupted when you talk about traumatic experiences. You talk about addiction as well. And I mean, I often told, maybe it was misguided, it's very difficult for people who experience trauma to sort of settle in for meditation.
It is very, in fact, I wouldn't go to that directly. This is, Bessel van der Kolk also has this wonderful, it's a trauma sensitive training around, sometimes it's just easier to get them into their body first. It's way too threatening to just sit and try to focus on your breath, because it's kind of like being asked to jump off a cliff without anything to catch you. Whereas if you can start with simple body movements that are not directly, because we don't feel fingers in our pinkies or at the bottom of our feet or in our knees. We feel feelings here in our chest. So meditation is very much, and they also may be ones that are better with, like the Tibetans always started meditation with a mandala or something that they looked into. They have much less attachment problems than we do here in the West. So they weren't worried about knowing what they were feeling. They were just training their focus and concentration. But it is very hard. That's a really good point. It's very hard sometimes to ask people who have been traumatized to just sit down and start focusing on their breath. You have to come in from the periphery.
Will you worry about that when you're in the school working and you notice that there is a child?
Yes, well, and that's part of the training that there are 10 turnkey trainers who have been trained in this, and they each have a team of 10 teachers, and that's part of what we're trickling down to all of the teachers, so that we're recognizing that we do not know kids' inner lives, what happens to them outside of school very often, how much trauma they're experiencing, and how scary this type of thing might be. So there's lots of different options. It's not just about sitting and focusing inward.
Wow, this sounds very exciting.
Oh, it is.
I mean,
I'm really.
And even for the finance people, should we say the budget people, this sounds like it might be cost effective as well versus
it has been
approaches?
Well, you know, I shouldn't say that. I can't imagine that it wouldn't be. Yeah, I'm already saying more than I know. I know it's been effective in reducing behavioral referrals, which I think many schools have found that they don't have to have quite so many therapy staff on board. But the other thing that it goes to is that, you know, when you go to this whole thing about what we're throwing lots of legislation and money at this Common Core and trying to get American students' scores up commensurate with some other countries in the world, and we don't seem to be able to budge it. Not budget. And this goes directly, I think, back to the fact that when you are traumatized, one of the things that happens when you are in fight or flight, or when you're in submit collapse, is that your cognitive function shut down. So you're not available to learn. When you're triggered, you aren't learning. All
right, well, this has been an incredible half hour. Thank you so much. But I just want to say, before we go, is there any message that you could share with parents, with children?
Oh, yeah. The message that I would share with parents is, even when your kids are driving you nuts, try to remind yourself that they do not get up in the morning and say to themselves, I'm going to see how I can mess up my life or my parents' life today. That any time kids are misbehaving, if you can begin to look at it as that dysregulated emotion is about you are asking them to do something that they aren't capable of doing in that moment. And compassion and empathy and understanding, eye-to-eye contact. I get you. I get it. Let's take a moment.
Yeah, if we could maybe more often think about how we're in this together.
Yes, that's right. And we co-regulate. You're the adult.
Okay. Bobby, it was so nice having you on the show.
This
It's
was fun.
wonderful.
Yeah,
I mean,
I've had a
thank you
good
so
time.
much.
Thanks.